Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of the Brewed for Life podcast. Today, I'm going to touch on some of the things that I had started to discuss in episode 1, Dad Life, just to kind of bring you up to speed with a little bit of an explanation as to, what things were like for me growing up with my dad and some of the things that I really didn't enjoy and some of the things that I wish had happened sooner. So that's where we're going to go today, and we're, going to kind of get into it a little bit with the highs and the lows of all of those, situations and memories and all of those things that, helped kind of bring me to where I am now as a dad and as an adult. So today, like promised, get this open. The beer that I will be enjoying as we get into all this stuff is Hams. It's an old brewery. So classic. You can get it in a few areas of the country still. Incredibly cheap. It's like $5 for a 6 pack of 16-ounce cans, and it is hands down the most easy drinking, delicious of all the cheap beers that you'll be able to ever get your hands on. So to start, if you could find that in a store or ask your local place to grab it, try it, it's phenomenal. So with that said, I kind of want to start back um, when I was a kid, and my dad worked a lot, very similar to me when my oldest was born, and he my dad was a truck driver by trade, and it's what he did for as long as I could remember. At one point he had made a switch and was working in a warehouse, um, but for the most part, that's what he did. He drove tractor trailer trucks in the New York City area, which I give him a ton of credit for because I don't like driving a car in the New York City area. I couldn't imagine trying to drive a tractor trailer and fit in those tight spaces and deal with the traffic and all of that nonsense with driving down in the city. Growing up, my dad was very he was very strict, and he always had tasks for, me to do as a kid, and most of them pertain to being his helper. And when I say being his helper, I mean my dad did all the work, and it was my job to fetch the tools. It was my job to clean everything up. It was my job to just kind of be. Growing up, I hated it. I hated it because if there's one thing about my dad that I definitely choose not to take as an attribute from him, that would be he was messy. So our garage was always a mess. He had an uncanny knack for using 7 million different tools, and 6.99 million of them never got back to where they were taken from. As an adult, that is one thing that really kind of is a sticking point for me because I can't handle it when things are out of place now, and that's where I learned it from. Unfortunately, my dad would he would have tasks all over the place, and my dad was handy. Like he worked in construction in his younger life. He knew a little about electrical and plumbing and automotive, and he was just kind of a jack of all trades. So, growing up, as much as I hated having to be his little errand boy, I as an adult am happier that I did get to experience all those things because I learned a lot from him, and I learned a lot of tools that I can use now. And what I learned then, if I don't know how to do it now, I learned enough from him to be able to apply what I know and be able to figure out anything really that pops up in my house or with a car or yard work or any of those kind of things. So I'm very blessed to have had those experiences. And I have some friends that I have met along the way, and some of them don't have those skills and they don't know how to do those things. So I'm very, very happy that I had the experience to, be there. As much as I hated it when I was a kid, very, very beneficial as an adult. And I guess that goes to, you know, a lot of sayings that are out there, which are, like you fail to appreciate what you're doing in the moment as a kid, but as you get older, you really start to understand that as much as you hate it when it was a kid, it's applied and it's practical and it's useful as you get older. So my dad was phenomenal at that. Um, One of the things that I remember as a kid, and some of the first things that I really remember and have kind of, taken hold of me is when I was a kid growing up in the small town of Bethel. Like, I didn't really remember much of being there. I really, really loved the house. I loved the location. My dad worked a lot, but I do remember like little things of him helping us pack the snow so we could go sled riding, and I remember little moments of being there. And I know from my mom that my dad had really kind of put his touch on that house, and that was the first house that my parents lived in. The times that really kind of sit with me the most is when we moved to Brookfield, and that's when a lot of the weekend projects and chores and that kind of stuff really kind of started. And that was also at a time where I wanted to be out doing other things. I wanted to go hang out with my friends, and I would much rather be doing a million other things than being my dad's right hand man during whatever projects he had planned for the weekend. He always surprised me in different avenues. Even as I remember a lot of the negative things that had happened. He came home, and I don't know, somehow he got us a go-kart and he bought me a dirt bike and all things that he just did. And they weren't things that I asked for, they weren't things that I expected, they weren't things that I even had on my mind. But he brought these things home and we worked on them together, and we we got to enjoy them together. And as I'm talking about it now, it's incredible that I was happy I had those things as I was a kid, but I don't know if I truly appreciated the fact that he just did it. Like, he saw it and thought that we would love it, and he just grabbed it and brought it home. Unfortunately, like, as part of human nature, you tend to remember a lot of the negative things that go on when you're a kid, and things that you really, really hated. Him coming home with that stuff has to be one of the first things that I can remember, where I just went like, wow. And we were on those things all summer long, and the dirt bike I rode in the winter, and really, really got a ton of use out of those things. I wanted to start there so that you can understand that even at times where my dad was rougher than I would have liked him to be, he did things because he genuinely loved and cared us. They weren't things that you know for some kids and some families, like, parents can be rough and abusive both verbally and physically, and then they make up for that by gifting you things and taking you places or whatever so that you forget the bad times. That wasn't my dad by any stretch of the imagination. Was he rough on us? Yes. Like, it was a different time. Like, we got spankings, we we got called names, and it wasn't easy all the time. And I don't know if there's a direct correlation as to why me as an adult and through most of my adult life, I've always re- decided that I don't want to be a doormat. I don't want to be a pushover. I don't ever want to feel like somebody got over on me. And it could be because like, I didn't like what went on when I was a kid, and I felt like I was in a vulnerable position, which as a kid, those situations do put you in a vulnerable position. But I never really looked at it that way. I just didn't like that he was so hard lined with that stuff. And as I got older, my dad, he progressively got a little bit better, but he had a hard time breaking the fact that when I became an adult, that I was an adult at that point and not, still his little boy where he could, really have a say day in and day out as to what I was going to be doing. And that led to some friction at times with me and my dad. And, I regret those things. There was a time where, him and I were arguing about something, and I didn't really like what he had to say, and I stood my ground, and my dad, pushed me, and I pushed him back, and it's not a proud moment for me or at the time for him because, I know my dad loved me wholeheartedly, and I loved and respected him a whole ton. So for our relationship to kind of get to a point like that where both of us being so stubborn and short fused and just allowed a situation to get the better of both of us. And if I could turn back that one particular incident, I probably would have just walked away and I would have just allowed him to have the upper hand on that, if for nothing else, just so that it didn't get to that point. And as I moved on from that, I remember my dad had said that for most of his life, like I always thought that my dad had a good relationship with his parents, but when they bought the house in Brookfield, my dad told me that that was the first time that he could remember in his life that my grandfather looked at him and said he was proud of him and that he loved him and that he couldn't have been happier for him. My dad didn't always tell me he was proud of me, and he did, as, certain life events happened, and he would give me a hug and he would tell me he loved me and tell me that he was proud of me, but it wasn't definitely a regular thing that happened through our relationship. I don't know. I don't feel bad about it. I wish it had been different. I wish the way that things were when he got older, where he would tell me he loved me and he would, we would never leave without a hug, or, he would tell me he was proud of me. So I I wish that those times had started sooner on, so that not just for me, but so he really could see and know how much, I really loved him and how much I really appreciated, you know, what he had done for me throughout my life. I'd be a fool in saying that at different points I didn't really like my dad as an adult and obviously, as a teenager, but we always found a way to work through it. And what helped me work through that stuff is multiple times where I least expected him to stand by my side, he always did. Some of those times were in my early 20s. I was out living the life, going to bars, not thinking about repercussions, living a little free, wild. I don't know, just not a care in the world for what the hell happened. I just wanted to be enjoying life at whatever consequence came from enjoying life. And I got arrested for drunk driving, and my dad was not happy with me. I remember when I had to call them and let them know what had happened. But my dad was the first person to say, when it's time to go to court, I'm going with you. And my dad, who was always very outspoken and he was definitely a barker and he was a lot of things, he was my biggest supporter then, and he stood by my side, and he let me know that what I did was a giant mistake and that I'm gonna have to deal with the consequences of that. But to see him take off a day of work, which he never, not that I can remember, ever did, but he took off the day of work and he made sure he was there for me. I don't know, words can't even say how happy I was that he did that. And he always just did it, and that's what surprises me is that, him being raised the way that he was, that he did things without actually having to say it. And I don't know if my grandfather was like that with him, and that's where he learned it from. And you don't appreciate it, like I said, until you kind of sit back and reflect on it and realize that the times where the selfishness of an individual says, well, I wish you had said that you loved me, or I wish you had said that you were proud of me, or I wish that you had did this and did that. They did it in their own way. We're just so blinded in what we want as a reaction or a result compared to what somebody actually gives us. And we try to make somebody be in our space when their space might not be the same. But the result of what they're doing from their vantage point is everything that we're asking from them. It's just their way of expressing it. And I didn't appreciate that, like I said, when I was younger. My dad was he was definitely one of those people that was always willing to help somebody else and didn't want anything in return. He never wanted to take money from somebody, even if something cost him out of pocket. He just wanted it to be, well, I'm going to need your help with something down the road, so that's the way that we will reciprocate that, regardless of the cost. If it cost him a few $100s and what he's asking somebody to help him do might cost $5, it didn't matter to my dad. He just wanted it to be kind of, I don't know, like a trade. You help each other. That's what friends do. That's what neighbors do, or that's what you know used to happen, and it happens a lot less now, which is a whole nother topic. But my dad was just that kind of a guy, and he would give up his weekend to go help somebody, and he was a good man. My dad, I think the first time I can remember him saying that he loved me and was proud of me, and like everything that he had wished he had gotten from his dad earlier on in life happened the day that my oldest Ian was born, and my parents moved from Brookfield up to Torrington, where my oldest Ian's mom and I were living, and they had a house built, and they did everything they could to relocate themselves to make sure that they could be there to help raise and take care of and be, kind of a close knit support system for us as we were raising him. Again, underappreciated 100% that, that they did that and they sacrificed themselves and they put themselves in a tougher financial position in order to be able to do it. And my dad and my mom obviously made that decision together, but I'm glad that they were there because when I needed them, they were really, really close. And as some things changed in my life, they were there for me. And it made it easier for me because I hit some dark places during that time, and my parents and my dad especially were there to help me through it. I don't know if I said thank you enough to them and him for doing that. I just know that, through some of those times, I ended up just being angry at my dad, and I don't know if I didn't give him the benefit of the doubt for some of the things that upset me, or if I was just too proud, too stubborn, too ignorant, too arrogant to be able to appreciate and accept that, maybe what he was saying was true, maybe it wasn't, but I had just devised my own thoughts, my own process, my own judgment on what I thought it was. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have given him the benefit of the doubt and at least sat down and talked to him about it. But I didn't do that, and we never did that. We never had that conversation. But found a way to sweep it under the carpet and move on. And I'm very, very happy that that we did that, because as I moved into another relationship, and my dad being there by my side, and he again was proud of me that things didn't necessarily work out in my first relationship, and I was able to kind of figure it out and restabilize myself and move forward, obviously with them there to be supportive. He was happier than hell when I got remarried and tried to start this new life. When that didn't necessarily start moving in the direction that I wanted it to and it needed to, there was a lot of unsaid things in that relationship, and my dad, I was able to kind of just he would ask me, hey, how are things going, what's going on here and what's going on there, and again, I didn't appreciate what he was doing. And I think what he was doing at the time was really kind of reach out and make sure that I was okay and I was happy and that my life was going in a direction that I really wanted it to go in. But I was blinded by where I was at. I spent a lot of time not drinking heavily, but like everything was based solely around going to breweries, drinking beer, and just relaxing and not focusing on the things that were actually impacting my relationship in my life. That's where I think my first point of not being the dad I wanted to be happened. My ex, although I had asked and had multiple conversations about, try to really be a part of Ian's life, she never really stepped up and did that. I just remember it being awkward, and if they were both in the house, they both of them would be sitting in different rooms and there'd be no communication, and I'd be at work and she'd be texting me about, oh, Ian's in his room, he's not doing this, he's not doing that, and my response would be, well, why don't you go in there and see if you guys can go shopping or go outside and play basketball, or see if there's something you can help him with, or do something just to try to build that relationship with him. And she didn't do it, and I underestimated the impact that the life that we were living at the time was impacting my son. I, as a dad, felt terrible when I realized that I was failing my son, who I had vowed to always be there for him. And to have the reality of it kind of punch me in the gut of, you're not being a good dad, you're not paying attention to your son, you're not being aware of your emotions, you're not being aware of his emotions, you're not looking at your surroundings clearly. You're looking at them very biased, very filtered, um, just in a warped sense of reality, I guess is the best way I could put it. And I found out that my son didn't want to come to my house anymore, and he was in a bad place because of it. And as I am struggling through this relationship where I thought I was doing the right thing, because I'll be honest, the last fucking thing I wanted in my life was to be divorced again. But fuck, I made a promise to my son to be the best dad I could be and always put him first and always just never put him in a position where he's going to get hurt or upset. That was the breaking point for me. Outside of the fact that I wasn't truly happy in my relationship, multiple things that had always eaten me up about that relationship, just in the 7 years that we were together, I never got answers for. But I continued to go on walking through life blindly, like everything was okay and things were good, only to realize that things weren't good, It was a fucking terrible relationship. I wasn't happy. My son wasn't happy. And it was time to wash my hands and get the hell out of it. And I was lucky enough to have my current fiance by my side because she was the only thing in my life that seemed to have any kind of glimmer of hope. And because my relationship with my ex-wife was so bad, like I was blinded by the fact that life could be fucking better than it was, and that it doesn't have to be a struggle, and every day doesn't have to be a fight, and you don't have to lose your son for a relationship. When I made the decision to get divorced and get the hell out of that and start salvaging what was left of me and try to put my relationship back together with my son, and I started taking all kinds of time, and him and I were going to basketball games, and he was playing basketball, and I never missed a game, and I didn't give a shit what anybody had to say about any of it. I just knew I wanted to be there, and I was aggravated with myself that I had lost the time that I had with him already. So it was time to put my foot on the gas and start being a better dad and start paying attention and start rebuilding a relationship with my son and my dad, who, again, I was unappreciative of the kind of man that he was, stood by my side. And I think he was every bit as angry as I was, if not more, with where things had gotten. And both my parents looked at me and they were so happy I was getting a divorce because they both had said we felt like we were losing you. And I don't know where I was or where I was mentally or what I was doing that made them feel that way, but for the people that had raised me my entire life and had always been there for me, for them to say we felt like we were losing you, it solidified exactly what I was already thinking, and that was that it was time to move on with life. It was time to follow my heart. It was time to show my son that it's okay to admit failure. It's okay to say you fucked up. It's um it, it was time to show him that I did love him and that I was um heartbroken that I allowed things to get that far. And the crazy part is that Ian had always looked up to me, even when he was a baby. I always felt like him and I just kind of had this bond, and it broke my heart that as a dad, I didn't put myself in a situation where my son felt like he could talk to me about it. I think it kind of put him in a little bit of a shell where he was scared to say what he was thinking and scared to say how he was feeling. And luckily for me, Audrey, my current fiance, she has brought some things to light in my life that I refused to face head on before, and those are some of the things that unfortunately I had picked up from my dad. Short fuse, stubbornness, angry, um, pig-headedness, arrogance. Sure, there's a bunch of other words that can explain the feelings, but from the day that I met her, she was different, and she made me want to be a better person and really kind of reflect on who I am and where I could be facing my challenges as an adult, as a man, as a dad, as a father figure, as a leader, as a partner in a relationship. And she has challenged me more than I think I've been challenged at anything other any other thing I've ever been involved in. She calls me to the carpet, and I appreciate the hell out of that because I would not be where I am without her and without her pointing out, like, listen, what you're doing and how you're saying it or how you're reacting, this is impacting me. It's impacting, you know, Ian and my youngest is going to be 2 tomorrow, and it impacts him, and we don't want him to be like this. And I mean, to be fair, I don't want to be like this. So she definitely makes me more self-aware. The first time that she got to meet Ian, I remember we went to lunch, picked Ian up from school. We went to lunch, and the two of them just clicked like they had been best friends their whole life. Made jokes and made fun of me, and the two of them kind of picked on me the entire time we were at lunch, which was fine because as much as I didn't like it, I fucking loved it because Ian was connecting with somebody, and it was real. It was, unprovoked. It was just him being him and Audrey being Audrey, and to see that and to see my son see everything that I loved about her, it couldn't have made me happier that day. Then, as Audrey and our relationship really started to develop into everything that we thought it could be, Ian started reaching out to her and used her as a sounding board, which again made me just so happy that finally I had done something right in the last 9 years of my life to be able to have somebody that he felt comfortable around also. Then Audrey got to meet my parents, and she got to meet my dad, and my dad absolutely adored her. And he, at that time, after he met her, I could just see the happiness on his face because I think he realized at that time that I had found my person. I had found the woman who is going to just allow me to be me. I don't have to try to pretend to be somebody else. I don't have to be this chameleon. I could just be me. And she was going to be willing to love me for me. And that made me happy because for at least from my side of my son's life, he was going to finally see me be in a relationship that I was happy with, where um, I didn't have all these stressors and I didn't feel like I was fighting the world all the time. And he's very lucky. He had already had that because his mom had met a great guy, and he had I couldn't have asked for a better father figure for Ian you know on the other side. If it wasn't going to be me, I'm glad it was him helping develop Ian to be the individual that he is now. So many years removed from Ian's mom and I being split, like it's good that his mom and I have a great relationship, and we always talk about, Ian and where Ian's going and what we need to do to be able to kind of help him, and we've worked together as parents. And his stepdad has been an absolute contributing factor to Ian's life, and some of the things that Ian's been able to enjoy in this life. And Ian's very lucky to have had him when I was not being the best dad that I could be from being so blinded. Um, so as these changes are happening in our lives, Audrey got pregnant, and I remember we went downstairs, and we were living with my parents at the time as we were trying to get our own situation on 2 feet. And we told my parents about Audrey being pregnant, and the joy that I saw on my dad's face, and the joy on his face when he found out that we were having a boy again. And Christ's sake, my dad, while Audrey was pregnant, he would he would do everything in the world for her. He'd text her and just say, "Hey, I just want to know how you're doing today," or he would call her and he would bring her home stuff, just to make sure that she was going to be happy and make sure that she was comfortable. And you know, I I'd never seen him be that way, and I think him seeing how Audrey and I's relationship was, it made him be a better husband with my mom too, because I saw him doing things that I had never seen him do, and that was, be affectionate and love her and do all the things that I'm sure were going on behind closed doors, but never had the privilege to see. My dad, he was on dialysis because his kidneys were not doing good, and in the last year of his life, we got to do some things together, like go to Cape Cod, and I got to see some joy and some happiness and all of those things. And as that last year of his life went on, he really got to put his stamp of love and caring and nurturing and happiness. And when he passed, we were all heartbroken. And his legacy will continue to live on. So, with that, that'll be the end of episode 2. Thank you for listening, and be on the lookout for episode 3. Please take the time to check out the Instagram page, Brewed for Life, on Insta. And if you want, throw a follow on my homebrew page, which is Baines Brewing. So please check out those things. Let me know what you think about this episode, and we'll talk to you guys in another week. Thanks.